She doesn't understand a word. Once she signs the deal, I'll file for divorce.
I understood every word.
Briar Hall had been built to make people lower their voices. Walnut walls, brass sconces, portraits of dead men in gilded frames. Outside, Atlanta traffic moved behind iron gates. Inside, Vail Heritage Hotels had arranged the room like a promise. White linen, crystal glasses, polished silver, and one enormous poster beside the entrance. Arielle Baptiste stood at the center of it in a white dress beneath the words, "Heritage belongs to all of us." She had kept Baptiste as her legal name, though the Vail family marketed her publicly as Arielle Vail. She noticed what the photographer had changed. Her skin looked lighter. Her natural curls had been softened. Even her smile seemed quieter than the one she remembered giving. At the main table, Preston's name sat near the center. Eleanor was at the head. Sloane was beside her. Arielle's chair was there too, but her card was gone. She found it across the room near the service doors. The event coordinator approached with an apology already forming on his face. "Mrs. Vail, there was a seating adjustment. Who made it?" His eyes moved toward Eleanor. Mrs. Vail thought the main table should stay focused on financing. Arielle looked back at the empty chair beside Preston. No one had taken it. Eleanor leaned toward Sloane and spoke in French without lowering her voice. Her face makes the room look open. Her opinions only make meetings longer. Sloane raised her champagne glass. At least she knows how to smile when the cameras turn on. Preston heard them. Arielle knew because his jaw shifted once. He did not laugh. He did not object. He adjusted his cuff and studied the menu. That small movement hurt more than the words. Eleanor's cruelty had edges. Preston's silence was smooth enough to hide inside. Arielle stepped toward him. "My card was moved." He looked up, mildly irritated. "Just sit over there tonight. I was listed as a project advisor." His eyes flicked toward the guests, beginning to watch. "Arielle, please. Don't turn a seating chart into a larger issue." Before she could answer, the club manager appeared. "Mom, may I see your invitation again?" Arielle noticed the white couple behind her walk through without being stopped. The manager checked her invitation, then her face, then the invitation again. "Thank you," he said, as though she had passed a test no one else had taken. Arielle accepted it without comment. She turned toward the poster. There she was, 20 feet tall, welcoming everyone into a room where her own chair had been removed. The Vail family used French like a locked door. What they did not know was that Arielle had carried the key since before she could write her name. She understood every word. During dinner, Eleanor praised Magnolia Row's authentic local identity, then dismissed 2 black-owned vendors as too regional for the brand. Preston nodded when an investor congratulated Vail on its diverse leadership. Sloane instructed the camera crew to frame Arielle's 20-foot poster behind the speakers. Arielle smiled when required, just enough to give them nothing they could use. In the car afterward, Preston loosened his tie. "You handled tonight professionally." Arielle watched Atlanta slide across the window. "My face was at the entrance. My name was removed from the table. Which part was I supposed to be grateful for?" Preston exhaled. "Don't make every decision that doesn't favor you about race." She turned toward him. He was already looking at his phone. The conversation had ended for him. Arielle faced the window and said nothing. Silence had protected the Vail family because they mistook it for ignorance. That night, Arielle opened a blue cloth-bound notebook. Until then, she had recorded sentences, dates, names, the exact French words they believed disappeared after leaving their mouths. This time she added, "Removed from main table after Eleanor's comment. Black-owned vendors dismissed during financing discussion. Invitation rechecked. Other guests admitted without review." She read the lines twice. For the first time, she was not recording insults. She's recording what happened because of them. Arielle Baptiste learned language before she understood power. She grew up above Celeste's Laundry in Baton Rouge, in a narrow apartment where the roof leaked during hard rain and the wooden stairs complained under every footstep. The place was small, but nothing inside it felt empty. Books leaned against the walls. Old letters rested in tin boxes beneath the bed. A radio sat on the kitchen counter, tuned to news from New Orleans, Montreal, or Port-au-Prince. Celeste taught Arielle French and Louisiana Creole without ever calling it a lesson. A recipe became vocabulary, a song became history, a letter became proof that people could survive distance without losing themselves. At dinner, Celeste switched languages halfway through an argument and waited for Arielle to follow. If she did not, Celeste repeated nothing. "Listen harder," she would say. "People tell you who they are when they think you are not listening." By 17, Arielle could move between 3 languages without hesitation. At 18, she earned a scholarship to Spelman College. By 22, she had graduated and understood that Celeste had given her more than fluency. She had given her access. Arielle could hear what institutions promised in public and what they admitted in private. After graduation, she joined a consulting group that helped museums and hotels build fair relationships with local communities. She was good at it because she did not confuse representation with respect. She asked who was paid, who was photographed, and who still had no seat when decisions were made. That work brought her to New Orleans for a conference on heritage tourism. Vail Heritage Hotels was under pressure after opening a luxury property inspired by black music while hiring almost no black artists, chefs, or vendors nearby. The company displayed saxophones behind glass, printed old song lyrics on cocktail menus, and called it tribute. The community called it theft with better lighting. Arielle spoke on the second afternoon. "Culture is not wallpaper," she said. "You cannot peel it away from the people who created it and sell it back as a premium experience." The room went still. Preston Vail waited near the ballroom doors. He was 38 then, polished without seeming rehearsed. "You were right," he said. Arielle had heard that sentence from executives before. Usually it meant they wanted her approval without changing anything. About which part? Preston did not flinch. "All of it. We used the story and excluded the people. I want to fix that." Over coffee, he described a cultural strategy division with real authority, paid advisory roles, and community oversight. He sounded ashamed of arriving late to a truth she had known for years. That difference mattered, or she thought it did. Preston called the following week, then the week after that. He asked questions, remembered her answers, and invited disagreement without punishing it. Arielle saw a man trying to become better than the family name he had inherited. When he asked her to join Vail, he called it a partnership. When he asked her to marry him, he used the same word. Arielle believed him. Preston knew Arielle had grown up around French and Louisiana Creole, but she had always let him assume her French stopped at family conversation. He never asked whether she could follow contracts, negotiations, or the insult spoken at his table. She left her consulting position and moved to Atlanta, with a plan for the Cultural Access and Community Strategy Division. The launch was delayed 6 months for budget review, then another quarter for restructuring, then a full year because, Preston said, the board was not ready. Arielle waited because he kept promising the next meeting would be different. Slowly, the invitations changed. She was no longer asked to review contracts. She was asked to pose for photographs. She stopped receiving supplier reports and started receiving wardrobe notes. At hotel openings, Preston introduced her as the conscience of the Vail family, then continued the meeting without her. Sloan asked her to tell stories about Celeste because guests found them moving. Eleanor asked her to greet donors because Arielle made the company feel modern. Every request sounded flattering when separated from the pattern. Together, they formed a cage lined with compliments. Arielle believed she had married a man who needed a partner beside him. Preston had decided he needed a story the public could believe. The promise had not broken all at once. It had been edited, delayed, and quietly reassigned. Discrimination rarely announced itself in the Vail family. It arrived polished, smiling, and easy to deny. The insult was never loud enough to defend against without being accused of making the room uncomfortable for everyone else. At the Magnolia Row campaign shoot, Arielle sat while a stylist shaped her natural curls. Sloan watched, then stepped closer. "Can we make it less strong?" The stylist froze. Arielle met Sloan's eyes in the mirror. "Strong in what way?" Sloan gave a small laugh. "Don't make it personal. We just need something more neutral for the brand." Neutral. Arielle had learned that word could hide almost anything. Straighter hair, softer speech. Fewer questions. She let the stylist continue, though something inside her pulled tight. The next week, she and Preston arrived at Vale Crown Hotel in Savannah for a partner meeting. A new floor manager intercepted Arielle before she reached the guest elevators. "Staff access is down the service corridor," he said, pointing without looking at her badge. Arielle glanced at Preston. He had seen it. He said nothing until the manager checked the event schedule, found the Vale name, and went pale. "Mr. Vale, I'm sorry. I didn't realize she was with you." The apology landed where it had not been earned. Preston accepted it with a nod. Arielle stood beside him, untouched by the words meant to repair the moment. In the elevator, Preston pressed the button for the top floor. "He's new," he said. Arielle looked at the mirrored doors. "He knew enough to decide where I belonged." Preston exhaled. Not everything is a statement. It was to him. The doors opened. Preston walked out first. That evening, 14 guests gathered in the private dining room. Eleanor sat with Luke Moreau across from her and Sloane nearby. Arielle was placed toward the far end, close enough for photographs, far enough from the contract discussion. Eleanor switched to French after the first course. "Her Louisiana accent is too local for international events," she said. "It makes the company sound smaller." Sloane tilted her glass. "Then keep her remarks short. Let her tell one family story and smile." Arielle lifted her water. Her pulse stayed even. Behind her, a server dropped a spoon. Metal struck marble. Arielle turned on instinct. "Sonnet." The first syllables escaped before she stopped. "It's all right," she finished in English. The server thanked her and hurried away. Conversation resumed. Eleanor had not noticed. Preston was checking his phone. Luke had. He watched Arielle not with surprise but attention. The pause had been too precise. Not the stumble of someone reaching for a phrase, the correction of someone remembering a secret. Arielle felt his gaze and kept her expression still. After dinner, guests gathered near the coat room. Luke approached. In French, he asked, "Do you know where they placed my coat?" Arielle looked at him for 1 second, long enough to confirm he had chosen the language deliberately. "The attendant at the front can help you," she answered in English. Luke studied her face, then nodded. Of course. He did not press. He simply stepped aside and allowed her to keep what she had chosen to hide. On the drive back, Preston complained about the manager, the timing, the awkwardness. Arielle listened and realized he was upset only because the incident had embarrassed him, not because it had diminished her. That distinction settled quietly inside her. At home, she opened the blue notebook. Under the date, she wrote, "Hair described as too strong. Directed to service corridor. Apology given to Preston. Accent called too local." She paused before adding one final line, "Luke Moreau may know." For the first time, the secret no longer belonged only to her. The North Atlantic Impact Fund call began at 9 sharp in Vale Heritage Hotel's executive conference room, where every detail had been arranged to suggest control. Water glasses stood in straight lines. Financial projections glowed across 3 wall screens. A scale model of Magnolia Row occupied the center table, a restored hotel, 2 restaurants, a performance hall, and a public courtyard built over a piece of Savannah history the Vale family had recently learned to describe as shared heritage. $20 million depended on the next hour. Dr. Sophia Wade appeared on the main screen from Washington, composed and watchful. Beside her sat 2 advisors from Arielle, which meant the conversation moved between English and French. Preston opened with polished confidence. Eleanor smiled whenever the word community appeared. The interpreter handled the first section smoothly, then reached Appendix D. The original clause reserved part of event revenue for a locally governed development fund. The French interpretation changed its meaning. What should have sounded like money returning to the neighborhood became an additional management charge collected by Vale. Sophia's expression changed before anyone else in the room understood why. "Are you using money promised to the community to pay yourselves?" she asked. Silence followed. Preston looked toward the interpreter. "That is not what the document says." One of Sophia's advisors answered rapidly in French, reading the disputed sentence aloud. Preston caught fragments, not enough to respond. Eleanor kept smiling. but the fingers around her pen tightened. The interpreter tried to explain, made the sentence worse, apologized in both languages. Sophia closed the folder in front of her. If this is your financial structure, we have a serious problem. Outside the conference room, Arielle stood beside a credenza with revised event materials. She had been asked to deliver them, not join the meeting. Through the glass door, she heard the French sentence once and knew exactly where the error lived. She set the folders down, tore a sheet from a legal pad, and wrote, Appendix D. The clause refers to allocation for the local development fund, not a veil management fee. Check the draft dated the 12th. She entered without waiting to be invited, placed the note beside Preston, and walked out before anyone could ask why she was there. Preston read it twice. Pull the earlier draft, he said. An analyst opened the archived version. The original wording appeared on screen. The interpreter compared both texts, then nodded with visible relief. Mrs. Vale is correct. The allocation belongs to the community fund. Sophia reopened her folder. Then correct the translation and send a verified copy today. The call continued. Not warmly, but it continued. An hour later, Preston found Arielle near the service elevator. His tie was loose, his expression caught between gratitude and suspicion. How much did you hear? Arielle held the remaining folders against her chest. Enough to know everyone was looking at the wrong number. He studied her. Then, suddenly, he asked in French, Did you truly understand them? The question came fast, meant to catch instinct before thought. Arielle let 1 second pass. No more. What did you say? Preston watched her face. She gave him nothing. His suspicion weakened, then collapsed beneath the easier explanation. He laughed. Nothing. I was testing something. Did it work? Apparently not. He touched her arm as if the moment belonged to him now. You saved us a difficult morning, not the deal, not the community fund, a difficult morning. By dinner, the story had changed again. Preston told Eleanor that Arielle had noticed a strange percentage while carrying the papers. Eleanor answered in French, A stopped clock still tells the right time twice a day. Arielle stood just beyond the dining room archway. She heard Preston give a small laugh. Later, she opened the blue notebook and wrote down the clause, the corrected draft, Sophia's question, and Preston's test in the hallway. Then she added one line beneath them. They do not lack evidence of my ability. They lack the desire to see it. She closed the notebook slowly. Being underestimated had once felt like a wound. That night, for the first time, it began to feel like information. The campaign shoot ended at 4:30 beneath the white lights of Vale Crown Hotel's ballroom. Arielle had spent 6 hours turning slightly left, lowering her chin, lifting her eyes, and repeating lines written by people who had never asked what she believed. The final video was supposed to introduce Magnolia Row as a model of authentic representation. Arielle had written one sentence of her own. A community should not merely appear in the story. It should retain ownership of what the story creates. Sloane watched the playback once and crossed her arms. Cut that section. The editor looked up. The line about ownership? It sounds political. Arielle stood beside the monitor. It sounds specific. Sloane smiled without looking at her. Specific is not always useful. Then she pointed at a still image on the screen. The lighting is too heavy around her face. Brighten it. The photographer shifted uneasily. Her skin tone is accurate. I didn't say inaccurate. I said heavy. We need warmth and openness. Everyone in the room understood. No one named it. Arielle looked at her own face beneath the editing grid and felt something inside her go quiet. She had learned how to survive rooms like that. Keep her shoulders relaxed. Ask one clear question. Never give them the anger they were waiting to use as proof. How much brighter? She asked. Sloane finally met her eyes. Enough to fit the rest of the campaign. Arielle nodded once. She gathered her bag, thanked the crew, and left before anyone could call her difficult. In the underground garage, she sat behind the wheel without starting the car. The concrete walls held the day's heat. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. For several minutes, she watched people pass between parked cars, carrying garment bags and equipment cases, moving on as if nothing had happened. Her phone buzzed. The design team had sent a preview for approval. Arielle opened it. The woman in the image still had her face, but the resemblance ended there. Her skin had been lightened by several shades. The shape of her natural hair had been narrowed and smoothed. The sentence about community ownership was gone. Beneath the image, a caption read, "Arielle Vale shares her vision for authentic representation." She stared at the word authentic until it lost meaning. Then she reached up and removed the first pin from her hair. Another followed, then another. The stylist had used more than a dozen to hold her curls close to the shape Sloane preferred. One pin slipped from Arielle's fingers and struck the floor mat with a small metallic sound. That was all it took. Her breath caught. She closed her eyes, but the pressure behind them had already broken. Arielle opened an old recording saved under Celeste's name. Her grandmother's voice filled the car, warm and unhurried. "Do not let anyone convince you that disappearing is the price of staying in the room." Arielle pressed Celeste's number. Her thumb hovered above the call button. Arielle pressed Celeste's number, but her thumb stopped above the call button. She imagined her grandmother hearing one change in her voice and understanding too much. Unable to place that hurt in Celeste's hands, she canceled the call. The first tear fell onto the phone, directly across the altered photograph. More followed. Arielle lowered her head and let herself cry. No shouting, no broken glass, no dramatic promise of revenge. Only the exhaustion of a woman who had spent years holding her expression steady for people who treated composure as permission. She cried for the career she had paused, for the meetings that had continued without her, for every compliment that had quietly removed another part of her. Most of all, she cried because the edited image was not an accident. It was the clearest version of what the Vale family had been doing all along. Keep the face, soften the color, keep the history, remove the ownership, keep the woman, cut the voice. After several minutes, Arielle wiped the screen with the edge of her sleeve. She found the fallen pin, placed it in the cup holder, and opened the blue notebook. She wrote Sloane's exact instruction. She recorded the line removed from the video, the photographer's objection, the approval email, and the time the edited file arrived. She saved the original images in a separate folder and forwarded both versions to a private account. Until that afternoon, Arielle had documented what the Vales said about her. Now she began documenting how they altered her into someone easier to sell. The email arrived at 6:12 on a Thursday evening, sent by an analyst who still had Arielle's old Vale advisory address in a distribution list. She almost deleted it. The subject line read Magnolia Row vendor alignment, and she had stopped receiving messages like that nearly 2 years earlier. Then she saw the attachment count. 11 files. Arielle opened the folder at the kitchen table. The first document was the version prepared for investors. It featured photographs of Black-owned restaurants, local musicians, neighborhood historians, and family businesses that had survived rising rents and years of neglect. Green Table appeared on page 7 beneath the words Community Culinary Partner. Julian Reed's performance space filled an entire slide titled Preserving Savannah's Musical Legacy. The document promised partnership, ownership, and shared growth. The second vendor list told another story. Green Table had been removed. Beside its name, someone had written, "Lacks the refinement required for premium clientele." Julian's venue remained in the presentation, but no contract had been approved. An internal email described his opening night appearance as an in-kind cultural contribution. Another executive suggested offering social media exposure instead of payment. Arielle read every line twice. The public plan treated the community as partners. The internal plan treated them as scenery. 2 days later, she drove to Savannah and found Odessa Green behind the counter at Green Table, reviewing invoices beneath a framed photograph of her father in a white apron. The restaurant smelled of roasted onions, coffee, and the wood polish used on tables older than most of Vale's executives. Odessa did not seem surprised to see her. "I wondered when somebody from that family would come without a photographer," she said. Arielle placed the investor presentation on the table. "Did you know they were still using your name?" Odessa looked at the page and gave a quiet, humorless laugh. She brought out a thick folder containing supplier bills, payroll records, newspaper clippings, and photographs spanning almost 30 years. "They asked for pictures of my father," she said. They want one enlarged for the hotel lobby. Called him a neighborhood pioneer. Her finger rested on the photograph. But they won't buy one meal from the kitchen he built. There was no pleading in her voice. Odessa was not asking Vale to rescue her, only to stop turning her family into decoration. Later, Arielle met Julian Reed inside a narrow performance hall 3 blocks away. The carpet was worn. The stage lights flickered. Every wall carried the names of musicians who had played there before luxury developers discovered the neighborhood's value. Julian handed her the invitation Vale had sent. "Read the last paragraph." Arielle did. Vale thanked him for contributing his talent to a celebration of shared heritage. No fee, no travel support, no equipment budget. "They call it a partnership," Julian said. "One side gets paid, the other gets thanked." Arielle looked around the room and imagined its history reduced to a backdrop behind champagne glasses. The numbers in the spreadsheets had faces now. They had hands, rent, payroll, memory. When she returned to Atlanta, Preston was in his study reviewing architectural renderings. Arielle placed both vendor lists on his desk. Why was Green Table removed? Preston barely glanced down. Odessa is a good person. That does not automatically make her restaurant right for the brand. You used her family in the investor deck. Because the history matters. But the people do not. Preston leaned back. That is not what I said. Then explain why her father's photograph is refined enough for your lobby, but his business is not refined enough for your guests. His expression cooled. You do not understand the scale of a project like this. Arielle held his gaze. I understand enough to know you are selling other people's history while keeping them outside the room where the money is divided. Preston's jaw tightened. For once, he did not tell her she was imagining the pattern. He simply looked away. Arielle gathered the documents and left. Until then, she had believed the cruelty inside the Vale family belonged to the marriage. Now she saw the larger design. They had not made her invisible by accident. Invisibility was part of how they did business. The Vale Foundation's new film was supposed to explain where Arielle came from. Not the whole truth. Only the version Sloan believed donors would find moving. It opened with an old photograph of Celeste outside her Baton Rouge laundry, then moved through worn books and images of Arielle walking through Magnolia Row while a narrator spoke about heritage. Near the end, Sloan added a recording Arielle had once sent Preston after a family dinner, Celeste singing softly in Louisiana Creole. Preston had uploaded the file to the campaign folder without asking Arielle or Celeste. The sound was warm and intimate. It had never been meant for a campaign. Arielle stopped the video. Take that out. Sloan looked up. Why? It is the strongest part, because Celeste did not agree to this. Eleanor sat at the far end of the table, turning a silver pen between her fingers. In French, she said, "We do not need the entire song. A few seconds are enough to make it feel authentic." Arielle looked directly at her. Authentic for whom? Eleanor's hand stopped. Arielle had answered in English, but her timing made Sloan glance between them. Eleanor recovered first. For the audience. Vale has invested heavily in your public image. Your family story is part of that work. My family is not campaign material, Sloan sighed. We are honoring where you came from. Arielle looked at the frozen image of Celeste, then honor her enough to ask. The recording was removed, but Arielle later heard Eleanor discussing it behind a partially open conference room door. Creole works under the images, Eleanor said in French. It gives texture, but not in the main speech. It sounds too rough for the room. Sloan agreed that French might feel elegant while Creole would make the presentation too regional. Arielle did not open the blue notebook that night. Documentation felt too small. A date and quotation could preserve the insult, but not the weight of hearing a language that had carried her family through loss, reduced to background sound. She drove to Baton Rouge the next morning. Celeste still lived above the former laundry. The stairs creaked. Books covered the same shelves. Celeste was sorting old cassettes when Arielle arrived. She looked up once. You drove all day without calling. Either you miss me or somebody disappointed you. Arielle smiled, but it did not hold. They sat at the kitchen table with coffee between them. Arielle did not tell her everything. She asked only, what would you do if people loved your story but did not respect your voice? Celeste studied her face. When people love your story only after they get to edit it, they do not love the story, they love control. Arielle looked toward the tapes. And if you already let them use too much, then decide what belongs to you before they decide for you. Back in Atlanta, Arielle called Renee Porter. The attorney listened, then asked precise questions. Who owned the recording? Had Celeste signed a release? What rights had Arielle granted? Which records could she access legally? Renee told her to preserve original files, secure tax documents, identify shared and separate assets, protect family recordings, and prepare an independent place to stay. Do not enter systems you are not authorized to use, she said. Do not confront Preston until we know what he is planning. Good evidence gathered badly can damage a good case. Arielle opened the blue notebook and wrote Eleanor's words. Then she created a folder labeled Consent and placed every receipt, image agreement, recording, and contract she could lawfully obtain inside it. Until then, Arielle had been waiting for the right moment to arrive. That night, she understood moments like that were rarely given. They were built. 5 weeks before the Magnolia Row announcement, Arielle was crossing the upstairs hall when she heard her name through Preston's office door. The door was almost closed, leaving only a narrow strip of light along the frame. Inside, Preston, Eleanor, and Sloane were speaking French. Arielle stopped. Eleanor's voice came first, calm and practical. We wait until the $20 million investment is signed. No movement before that. Preston answered, the campaign footage is nearly finished. Once the launch is over, I'll file. Sloane asked whether Arielle would still appear in the hotel materials after the divorce. Preston gave a soft laugh. Of course, we already paid for the production. The words reached Arielle without drama. That made them worse. They were not discussing a marriage. They were managing a brand asset. Eleanor continued. The family attorneys would describe Arielle as financially dependent, emotionally unpredictable, and unfamiliar with the company's operations. Any objections she had raised about race, hiring, or vendor treatment would be recast as personal conflict. Preston would say she had chosen to leave her career and had contributed little to the family's wealth. Sloane asked, what if she challenges the image releases? Preston laughed again. She signs whatever I put in front of her. Eleanor replied, that is why she was useful. Beautiful, manageable, and quiet. Arielle opened the Notes app and wrote the time, the names inside the room, and every sentence she could preserve. Her hand stayed steady. Inside the office, papers shifted. The conversation moved from the divorce to $4 million in management fees routed through a consulting company controlled by Eleanor's cousin. Preston said the transfer would be buried inside project development expenses. Eleanor asked whether Arielle had seen any of the records. She has never been a partner, Preston said. She is evidence people can look at and believe we changed. The sentence settled into Arielle with cold clarity. The promise between them had not failed. It had been false from the beginning. She listened until the meeting ended, until their voices moved on to launch schedules and donor lists, until betrayal became ordinary business again. Then she returned to the bedroom and closed the door. She did not open her laptop. She removed her wedding ring and placed it on the dresser. A pale mark remained around her finger. Arielle stared at it and remembered Preston in New Orleans, standing outside the conference ballroom, telling her he wanted to build a company where no one became decoration. He had not misunderstood her work. He had studied it closely enough to imitate its language. That realization hurt more than the plan itself. She called Renee. The attorney listened as Arielle repeated the conversation from her timestamped notes. When Arielle finished, Renee said, "This tells us what they intend to do. Now we need documents showing what they have already done." Over the next several weeks, Renee used Arielle's notes only as a map, then helped her lawfully preserve the divorce drafts, image releases, financial transfers, vendor records, campaign files, internal messages, and Preston's signed promise of a leadership role. Each document closed another escape route. The family would not be able to call the pattern accidental. They would not be able to turn every objection into emotion. Arielle was not preparing a scene. She was preparing a record By the time Magnolia Row opened its doors, the truth would already have its own key. Renee divided the work into 3 paths because one truth could be dismissed as bitterness, but 3 verified records could not. The first protected Arielle's rights in the marriage. Renee filed to preserve shared assets, challenged future use of Arielle's image without renewed consent, and gathered contracts proving she had left a successful career after Preston promised her a leadership role. Each document answered the story the Vale attorneys planned to tell, that Arielle had contributed nothing and chosen dependency. The second path moved through the company. Renee sent the financial records to an independent audit committee and demanded preservation of emails, vendor files, contracts, and campaign materials. Nothing went online. A truth released too early becomes a rumor they can attack, Renee said. A truth verified first becomes a record. The third path belonged to the people Magnolia Row had used as decoration. Odessa Green, Julian Reed, and several local business owners met in the back room of Green Table. They did not ask Vale to cancel the project. That would cost jobs and years of planning. They wanted real contracts, clear payment terms, community oversight, and control over how their histories were used. Odessa pushed a draft across the table. We are not asking them to save us. We are telling them the price of working with us honestly. Julian added a clause requiring paid performances and ownership credit for archival material. Arielle watched anger become architecture, not destruction. Design. Luc Moreau submitted a statement describing the investment call Arielle had saved and dinners where Eleanor insulted her in French, certain she could not understand. He included dates, names, and exact phrases. Tessa Morgan checked every claim against a second source. She interviewed former Vale employees and vendors who had watched Black-owned businesses disappear from the final list. I am not publishing a family argument, Tessa told Arielle. I am documenting a business pattern. Dr. Sophia Wade learned that Magnolia Row's public promises did not match the internal records. She did not withdraw the $20 million instead. She demanded an explanation from the Vale board and asked why 2 vendor lists existed. The question moved through the company like a crack beneath polished stone. Still, the Vale family believed they controlled the room. Sloan sent Arielle a 6-minute speech for the launch. It thanked Eleanor for her vision, praised Preston for opening doors, and described Magnolia Row as the opportunity that allowed Arielle to enter a world she once could only imagine. The final paragraph asked her to speak about Celeste's laundry and gratitude. Arielle read it once. The language was warm, polished, and false. It turned Celeste's strength into poverty, Arielle's work into luck, and Preston's exclusion into generosity. She printed the speech and placed it in a folder marked "The Version They Want." Then she placed the verified evidence and the community reform plan in a second folder labeled "The Version That Happened." Preston entered without knocking. He noticed the folders but not the labels. 6 minutes, he said. Keep it personal. People connect with you when you do not get too technical. Arielle closed the second folder. I understand. He smiled, satisfied. After he left, Arielle rested her hand on the cover. She was not preparing to impress the room with her fluency or status. She was preparing to show what the Vales had done when they believed the woman in the photograph had no voice beyond the words they wrote for her. Nearly 280 guests filled Briar Hall when Eleanor introduced Arielle as proof of the Vale family's open heart. Sloan waited near the stage controls, unaware that Arielle's final slide deck had already been loaded by Briar Hall's independent AV director through the standard speaker submission process. Preston smiled from the front table, certain the scheduled 6 minutes belonged to him. Arielle placed the prepared speech on the podium and began in French, quoting Eleanor's words exactly. Then she gave the English translation so every guest in Briar Hall understood. Her face makes the room look open. Her opinions only make meetings longer. Eleanor's expression hardened. Arielle continued in French, translating each sentence before moving to the next. I heard when you said my Louisiana accent was too local for international events. I heard when Sloan called my natural hair too strong. And I heard when you said my grandmother's Creole belonged under the images because it was too rough for the room. A silence moved through the room. Arielle switched to Louisiana Creole and repeated Celeste's words, then gave the room their English meaning. When people love your story only after they are allowed to edit it, they do not love the story. They love control. Then she returned to English. She spoke without slides at first. No bank records, no charts, only the marriage. She told the room Preston had promised her a leadership role, persuaded her to leave a career she had built, then used the dependence he created as proof she lacked value. The Vale family placed her black face in campaigns about inclusion, yet asked her to soften her voice, alter her hair, lighten her image, and leave the table whenever decisions were made. Arielle looked directly at Preston. "You did not fail to recognize me. You saw me clearly enough to know which parts could be sold and which parts had to be hidden." Preston rose and moved toward the stage. Arielle did not tighten her grip on the microphone. "You had 4 years to speak," she said. "These are my 6 minutes." Her scheduled remarks ended there. Before Preston could reclaim the stage, the board chair ordered him to sit down, converted the event into an emergency review, and authorized Arielle to present the verified record. When Sloan reached for the control panel, the chair instructed the AV director to keep the presentation running. Odessa Green and Julian Reed were seated near the center aisle. Their names appeared on the screen beside the evidence. Green Table featured as a community partner in investor materials, then rejected internally as too local. Julian's performance hall used to promote the project while he was asked to perform without pay. 2 different vendor lists. Arielle's original photograph beside the lightened version. The email cutting her statement about community ownership. Records showing nearly $4 million routed through an affiliated company. Arielle did not reveal private details that served no public purpose. She said only that the marital and financial records had been delivered to her attorney and the proper authorities. Dr. Safia Wade stood. She announced that North Atlantic Impact Fund would pause its investment until Vale accepted an independent audit, new project leadership, transparent vendor selection, a binding community agreement, and a complaint process outside family control. Luc Moreau then confirmed that Arielle had saved the earlier negotiation and that the Vale family had repeatedly excluded her despite knowing her competence. Eleanor rose halfway from her chair. "You are turning a family matter into a performance." Arielle faced her. "This family placed my marriage on a poster. I am returning the truth you edited out of the picture." She ended with one sentence. "Respect should not begin after we discover how many languages someone speaks, what degree they hold, or how much money they can cost us. It should begin before we know anything except that they are human." Preston lost control in a quieter way. He remained standing, but no one waited for him to decide what the truth meant. Over the next 100 days, the audit confirmed biased vendor practices, reduced community commitments, unauthorized image use, related party transfers, and retaliation against employees who objected. After the audit committee confirmed the records, Tessa published her investigation, documenting how Vale had used Black history in public while excluding Black businesses in private. Preston was suspended and later resigned. Eleanor left the foundation. Sloan lost control of the brand division. Vale survived under independent leadership, and Magnolia Row was rebuilt around paid contracts, local oversight, and clear standards. Based on the audit findings, Vale's board ordered the affiliated company to return nearly $4 million to Vale Heritage Hotels. In the divorce, the court rejected Preston's attempt to exclude Arielle from assets tied to the career she had surrendered at his request. 1 year later, Baptiste Cultural Access Group employed 16 people. Odessa advised local vendors. Julian managed the restored performance space under a paid agreement. Arielle's fellowship distributed $120,000 each year for language study and cultural access. In her new office, 2 photographs hung side by side. The old Vale poster and an unedited image of Celeste outside the Baton Rouge laundry. A client once asked why Arielle kept the poster. To remember that appearing in the picture does not mean you were seen. She opened the conference room door. Odessa, Julian, language specialists, and former outsiders waited inside. This time no one had been invited as decoration. Everyone had a chair. If Arielle's stand for dignity stayed with you, like the video and subscribe for more stories like this. Which moment affected you most, and where are you watching from?